right, good afternoon, everyone. Hello, and welcome to Explain Like I'm Five. I saw you dancing.
It's groovy, as the kids say.
It is hip. I don't know any other words to describe it because I'm not a hip person myself.
Oh, neither am I. Don't let me fool you.
Yeah, it's like I listen to bluegrass music and watch Star Wars on a regular basis, so don't take my advice for what is cool, basically.
Hell yeah. I totally interrupted your intro. I'm sorry.
No, that's great. That is basically how it rolls here, and I am in full support of all of it. So.
Right on.
Yay, Nathaniel's here. See, this is Speak of the Devil. Hi, Nathaniel. We were just talking about
Hello. Hello.
So this is Explain Like I'm Five. This is a show where we get people to come on and talk about basically anything other than, atheism. That's what we aim for anyway. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes the conversation just wanders. We've had some interesting conversations on this show. So
yeah, I was expecting counter apologetics. I don't.
It's like, we're just gonna go full deep into Braxton Hunter's 10 questions for atheists. Oh wait, no, we're not, because that guy is an awful person. Thank you, Nathaniel. This shirt actually happens to belong to Nathaniel. It says, I need my shirt.
That's great.
Yeah.
I saw, I think it was a tweet. Somebody was like, all of biological life is a fight against space. And I was like, it's like the most galaxy brain take I have ever heard in my life.
It's true.
Right?
It's just basically we as a planet and all of its inhabitants are trying to expand, and space is like, no.
Yep.
That's amazing. So, because I should probably introduce you, with me today, I have the fantastic and wonderful Callie Wright. How are you doing today?
I am caffeinated.
we were discussing beforehand, but we both have cups of coffee.
I actually I'm about to take the last sip.
Last little sip.
Yeah,
I've got my big old Yeti, and it's funny because I got this Yeti for Christmas last year, and it's a Whataburger Yeti, and it's one of those, like, people outside of Texas know Whataburger because it has to do with Texas, and how do you know that somebody's from Texas? Don't worry, they'll tell you. Which, I mean, of course, hi, I'm from Texas, so.
Well,
I gotta represent.
Because I'm in the I'm in the podcast world, not only like my own podcast, but I make part of my living doing freelance editing and production for other podcasts. And you say Yeti, the first thing I think of is the microphone you're talking into.
This one, yeah.
And it took me a second to put together, like, oh no, that's a brand name for like mugs and cups and coolers and stuff too. It just took me a second to get those neurons firing.
To be all like, oh, that's that one.
Yep.
Yeah, because I mean, technically I have two on my desk right now.
Right.
In all technicality, because I got this little one right here. Yeah.
Yeah, this is my Mega Man mug.
Nice.
That I got from Think Geek. Rip.
There's still a Think Geek store in the mall next to us, or not like next to us. It's like 15 minutes away, but we live in the Portland metro, so everything is, it's not like Dallas where everything is spread the fuck out. Portland is just all like, we're a relatively small metro, but there's still a Think Geek store there.
So you've been to Dallas. Are you from Texas?
I am from Texas. How did you know? How did you know?
I'm just going to keep bringing that back until it feels really obnoxious. I just want to let you know right up front.
That's perfect. That is, I am all about that. Not even going to lie to you. Here, let me, take a sip out of my giant Whataburger Yeti here. And I have another one that I got for Christmas last year from a coworker. That's because Whataburger has their fancy ketchup, and that's like the thing. It's like Whataburger ketchup. And my coworker and I at my last job got each other ketchup Yetis. Like this tiny little one, like, because it's fancy ketchup and spicy ketchup. I got her the one that says I'm so spicy. She got me the one that says I'm so fancy.
That is, just gonna say it. That is incredibly gay. Like, that is so gay.
I don't have a problem with that in the slightest. I don't have a problem with that in the slightest. I'm okay with that. Yeah, it's like totally fine.
No, I like that you drank it because obviously you're shilling for your brand, and you were drinking it, and the logo wasn't facing the camera. And I was like, "Come on, what are you doing?"
Wasn't doing a very good job at that. I need to sort of get it turned around. Maybe if I drink it like this instead.
There it is. Yeah.
I feel like I should be a little game show model or something. I don't know. Fuck if I know. Anyway. Yes. So you can sort of see a dog underneath it. We'll do this.
Dogs are the best.
Hi, Benny.
Hi, Benny.
He does not give a shit right now.
Oh, baby.
Hey, bud. No, he didn't give a shit.
No, right on. I respect that energy.
Yeah, he's just all like, I'm a corgi. I don't care.
Yeah.
So, because we have spent the first 8.5 minutes, or well, I guess technically 6 minutes because there was an intro, full on about, everything. Right. So what would you like to talk about today?
So what has been on my mind lately is the really messed up way that our society teaches people how to be productive and accomplish things. And I know we were talking about like ADHD and related topics before we went live, and that's been I actually started talking to a therapist because I thought I might have ADHD, like just doing like self-diagnosis, reading all the symptoms. I know I'm not a professional, but like a lot of it resonated with me, like very easily distracted, hard to focus, all of that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And, but the thing for me is that like the big change that I had in my life is like 2 years ago, I got shit canned from my day job after working there for 4 years and having a very solid stability in my life for 4 years for the first time in my adult life. Like I went to work at 11 a.m. and was handing in my laptop by 3 p.m. We all got laid off and they shut the whole department down. And that kind of threw me into a tailspin of like, what do I want to do? Because I was a supervisor in a tech support call center, making okay money, but I really didn't care that much about what I was doing. And so I thought, like, am I going to go like try and get a similar job? Do I want to try and get like an IT certification and go into IT? Or do I like really want to try and make stuff happen with my podcast, with doing work for other people and that kind of stuff? And I ended up kind of falling into one or two freelance jobs because it's just like, well, shit, like I need money. And I saw somebody advertising for an editor. And so I went for it. And then it was like, oh, wow, I can do this. And then I realized that I was really having trouble keeping my shit together, doing that, like organizing my workday and figuring out what I need to accomplish and like what I need to do for my own show, what I need to do for other people's shows, keeping track of my bookkeeping, my accounting, project management, all of that sort of stuff. And it was all really, really overwhelming to me. And that was kind of when I started thinking like this might be like a sort of pathological brain thing for me. But then I also thought my entire life, I have worked jobs for other people. And I've always had some sort of like hard outside accountability, like a manager, a boss, somebody like that, like looking over my shoulder, making sure that I'm doing the thing I'm supposed to be doing. And when it's just me, like working with clients, like I don't have any employees. Like I am my business in terms of my own podcast and the work that I do for other people. And like I hire people here and there to do like transcripts and that kind of stuff. But like when it comes to like doing the work, it's just me. So I'm accountable to no one but myself, really. I mean, I'm accountable to my clients. Like if I have an episode due on Friday, it's got to be done on Friday. But my client doesn't care if I pulled an all-nighter the night before or if I finished it a week ahead of time. Like that's all on me, right?
Right.
And
right.
so I was talking to my therapist, and my therapist was like, I don't know that a diagnosis so much is the most important thing. Like, let's figure out what the actual problems are. Like, what are you having trouble with?
Mhm.
And I realized that it was that not having that accountability. And I had just never been taught to operate that way without that kind of outside accountability.
Yeah, without that very specific structure that's expected of you from someone else.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
so that would lead to, I'm up until 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning finishing client work. I'm up until 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning finishing my episode, and all of that kind of stuff. And I was like, how do I fix this?
Mhm.
And I became kind of a productivity junkie. Like I read a ton of books and a ton of blogs and all of this sort of stuff. And there's a big overlap with like forming healthy habits and that kind of stuff. And so one, there's all kinds of woo in that, right?
Of course.
There's all kinds of toxic positivity. Like if you're having trouble, it's because you're not hustling hard enough, like that kind of shit. Like if you're having trouble, you're like, you must be doing something wrong. And, you know, the whole message is that like, you are broken and you need to fucking fix yourself. Like that's kind of the message.
And then it doesn't tell you like what you need to do to fix yourself. It's just a matter of like,
right.
You're broken. Yay. It's just all like, you sound like my fucking like middle school friends. What's wrong with you? I don't know. Yeah.
Right. Well, it's like, I get distracted really easily. And somebody would be like, well, have you tried not being distracted?
Have you tried focusing?
Yeah.
I mean, tried real hard. And this is not because Star Wars, this is not a do or do not, there is no try thing.
Right. Exactly. And so a lot of this was me trying to figure out like, how do I fix my brain so this stops happening?
Mm-hmm.
And it took me a long time to figure out that that's kind of the wrong approach. And the reason I think why a lot of us think that way is because most of the time we are accustomed to having that sort of outside accountability, right? Like we have to figure out how to navigate those systems where we have bosses and managers and supervisors and that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And so you get accustomed to like, well, my boss handed me a to-do list. I'm going to go do that. Right. Mm-hmm. And when we fall outside of that, I say I'll just say me because I can only speak for myself here. I mean, like, I know my experience is not universal. But, you know, when I fall outside of that, I fall apart because I've never been taught how to operate a different way. Mm-hmm. It's not that my brain is broken, not that there's anything wrong with like having a mental illness or anything like that, because I have severe anxiety. And that's actually like, there's overlap between anxiety disorders and ADHD and some of the symptoms. And my therapist is like, actually, you're just like really, really anxious. And this is what's causing these problems for you. But I started thinking about how do I work with my natural tendencies instead of just convincing myself that my brain is broken and I'm terrible and worthless. And I started thinking about like, well, you know, when I try to keep up a new habit and I fail, instead of letting that be a commentary on me being like lazy or a bad person or not being motivated enough, my therapist, who is amazing, I see a comment there that says, step one, find a dope therapist. And yes, absolutely.
Yeah. It's like Tapioca Weasel is on the right path there.
Yeah. And my therapist was like, so when something like that happens, what is the cause of that? Like, what's happening that you're like choosing one path over another? Mm-hmm. And she kind of taught me to think a little bit more dispassionately about those kinds of things. And so I think about, for example, my knees are like sort of on the verge of messed up. They're not actually messed up. But like, you know, if I'm too hard on them, I can feel it. I can't really run for long periods of time, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And I got physical therapy exercises for him because I went and saw a physical therapist like, hey, I'm feeling the beginnings of something here. And they're like, yeah, here's a bunch of exercises you can do. And I'm supposed to do them every day. For a long time, I did not. And I would go stretches where I did, and then I would stop, and then I would just be like, I'm fucking worthless, man. I can't keep these habits up. Why can't I do this thing that's good for me?
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to like kind of step back a little bit and think about like, okay, what is it that happened that caused me to not do it that one day that stopped it? So like, I drank a bunch the night before. I woke up feeling really tired because I normally do them in the morning. And so if I wake up and I'm super tired in the morning, especially if it's a weekend and I don't have work to do, then my brain is not in the like, let's get things done mindset. And it's easy to just forget about everything that I have to do. Right. And so then I think about like, how do I fix that? Mm-hmm. And it blows my mind. I was thinking about this. There's a book that I want to give like a qualified recommendation for. Mm-hmm. It's called Better Than Yesterday, I think, or Better Than Before. Mm-hmm. It's by Gretchen Rubin. And there's some not great stuff in there about diet culture and intentional weight loss and that kind of stuff that I'm not a super huge fan of. Yeah. But there is some helpful stuff in understanding like personality types and how they play into the way that you respond to accountability. So like, do you respond to outer accountability? Like your friend is depending on you, your parent is depending on you, your spouse is depending on you, that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Do you respond to inner accountability? I made a promise to myself, that kind of stuff. Right. And kind of the interplay between those things. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking about how that works for me. And it's like, pre-COVID, I was at every roller derby practice, basically always on time, unless I was like out of town for work or I was sick. Mm-hmm. And why is that? One, because roller derby is super fun, so that's a motivation. But also, it was an outside motivation. My teammates are counting on me to be there, and I'm counting on my teammates, right? So that's outside accountability. And I basically never found it difficult to get there. Even if the rest of my life was fucking falling apart, I never found it difficult to get there. Yeah. Because it was that combination of like, I'm doing something I really love and I have that accountability from people that matter to me that are like depending on me because we're going to have, we've got a game in 2 months. And if I'm not at practice, then we're not learning to play together, that kind of stuff.
Right.
And so I started thinking about, well, shit, how do I create that for myself? Because I'm sure as hell not going to convince someone else to care about my business because like,
if it's only you, then it's all like,
exactly.
Well, I guess I gotta give a shit now.
Like my wife is fantastic, but she's got her own job to worry about. I can be like, babe, can you make sure I get all my work done before the day is over today? Like, I don't want to put that on her.
Yeah, like that's emotional labor that it's like, we've got enough going on.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I was just like rolling all of this over, thinking about all of this. And one, figuring out like where the resistance is. So like my brain, another thing that made me thought that I might have ADHD is that my brain is constantly craving input. Sometimes I fidget a lot, I stim a lot. And I know that's common with ADHD. That's common with autistic folks. And there's a lot of overlap between similar neurodivergence like that, right?
Yeah.
And a friend of mine suggested, like you're stimming because your brain is craving input of some kind, and your brain is feeling like you're not getting some kind of input that you want. And that's why if I'm doing a client podcast edit, for example, and my brain just decides it wants to know what's happening on Facebook, I would almost always like open Facebook and I would get distracted. I would hit pause on the podcast that I was editing, and then I'd get sucked into Facebook and I'd lose like an hour. Right.
Yes. And then you're just sitting there doom scrolling and it's just like, oh my God, like, why am I doing this? I know it's such a bad idea. And then it's like, then you feel bad for like wasting the time. And then it's like, I've already wasted this much time. It's that sunk cost thing. I've already done this. So I might as well just oh God, yes. Yep. Oh my God.
Absolutely.
I feel this again on such a deep level.
Yeah. But then like, so I've identified the specific problem, right? Like my brain is craving input of some kind. Mm-hmm. So is there a way for me to give that to myself without the whole fucking day falling apart? Mm-hmm. So instead of just saying like, I just need to fight that urge and forget about it, I just kind of realized like that's just how my brain works. Like there's not going to be a way that I can just turn that part of my brain off. Like it just doesn't work that way.
Right.
And in my massive search through like productivity blogs and books and all of that shit, I ran into something that is I don't know that it's controversial. It's controversial because a lot of people think it's a solution to everyone's problems when it's not a solution to everyone's problems. It's called the Pomodoro technique.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a thing that's like the people that it works for tend to evangelize for it, and they tend to just like not listen when people are like, no, I tried that and it doesn't work for me. Like, well, you're not doing it right. You know, like that kind of shit.
I thought you were going to say bullet journaling, and because that is the exact same thing. Yes. Like with people who love it. It doesn't work for everybody. Yeah. I restarted one.
Well, anytime somebody finds something that works for them, I mean, it comes from an understandable place, right? Like this has been an amazing thing for me and I want to share it with the world. But there's a bit of solipsism in realizing like not everyone's brain works like yours does. Like the thing that is absolutely magic for you might be the worst thing someone else could do. And like, you just have to accept that.
Yeah. It's a hard realization to come to sometimes.
But. It is. And so I thought like, let's give it a shot. I found a free Pomodoro timer app on the Mac App Store. And the idea is you do like a sprint of work and then you take a short break. And the people play with the times. You find a time that works for you. And so so the way that I do it is I work for 25 minutes, take a 5-minute break. And then after 4 rounds, you do a 15-minute break. But usually after 4 rounds for me, it's lunchtime. So I end up taking like an hour break. Mm-hmm. But while I'm working, it's 25 minutes of just work and then a 5-minute break. And the reason why I figured out that works for me is 25 minutes is just, it's not a super long time. And if I'm in the middle of doing something that works, if my brain is like, we need to check Twitter, I can look at that and say, we can absolutely check Twitter in 8 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's enough for my brain to snap out of it and refocus on what I'm doing, because I'm not saying no, I'm just saying like, wait a minute. And that really, really works for me.
Yeah, it's sort of it's to me that's very and that's funny that you're talking about this, because that is something that Nathaniel and I have applied whenever we're working on like YouTube videos. Mm-hmm. Like we're just like, okay, we're gonna go, but we sort of go for longer stretches because we do like 45 and 15. Mm-hmm. Like that's sort of what we've found works for us. I didn't know that's what that was called, so that's really cool. Mm-hmm. And it's you know, it's not denying yourself the thing. It's sort of like, you know, you might as well just have like a single Oreo instead of like a whole bunch of like the Oreo thins or the you know the low fat Oreos or whatever. Right. It's like your brain is going to get what it wants. Mm-hmm. You just have to be able to be like, okay, like we've got a goal first. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's about, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but I know what I mean in my head. I swear I do. I think you're on the same page as I am.
Yeah, well, and it gives me time to do the other stuff that I want to do too. So like one of the other problems that I was trying to figure out is why I couldn't keep on a routine with my physical therapy for my knee. Mm-hmm. And I mean, the routine literally takes me 10 minutes. Like that's such a small percentage of my day, right? So like, why couldn't I do that? But what I've figured out that I do is I use my first 2 5-minute breaks to do my knee physical therapy. Oh, and when I cut it in half, it actually takes a little bit less than 5 minutes to do. Mm-hmm. And so I can do that where I accomplish something really cool. And then I can sit down and I can check my Twitter notifications for a minute or two. And my brain gets that like quick social media dopamine hit. My knees feel better and I know I've accomplished that thing. And then it's very, very easy for me to settle back down and just turn my attention back to work. Right. And that's just, it has worked wonders for me. And it seems to hit all of the needs that I have for like differing kinds of stimulus at different times. Mm-hmm. But I think for me, it was like the first important step was separating my value as a person from my ability to like control the way that I react to those things.
Yeah. Like it's so and like how you view like, and I this might be jumping ahead ever so slightly, but it's like how you view like, oh, I've been productive, therefore as a person I am, I inherently have more value than I would if I, was doom scrolling all day. It's all like your value and your merit are not based on how much and what you produce.
Yeah, well, and for me, it's also understanding, again, like removing the value judgment and saying, like, I spent all day doing this. This is not healthy for me to have done, as opposed to I spent all day doing this because I'm a piece of shit. Like, those are very, very importantly different framings to have, right?
Yeah.
Because I can think about, if I have a day like that, especially like on a weekend day where I don't really have any work to accomplish. And, my wife is like rating on WoW and that kind of stuff. So like, I'm just kind of hanging out with my dog.
Yeah.
And, doom scrolling for hours and hours. And I start to think about like, why am I actually doing this? Like there's, the dopamine hit that comes from the, I forget the guy's name, but he talks about the endless timeline of social media being like the lever on a slot machine. Like it kind of hits that same area of your brain. And so I can think about that, but I can also think about, where am I emotionally that this is the thing that I'm doing? You know what I mean? Like, what is it? Am I depressed? Am I anxious? Am I worried about something? Am I trying to like, because for me, sometimes it's about trying to like distract myself from something I'm worried about, or from like some like big upcoming task, or a difficult conversation that I need to have. That kind of stuff is trying to distract myself from that. And there's just like this whole self-talk routine that I go through, because inevitably, I avoid, I push it off, I push it back, then I do the thing, and it's never as bad as I thought it was going to be.
Right. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's whenever you actually get down to doing the thing, it's like, why was I so like scared of this? Why was I so worried about it? And then it's all like, oh yeah, brain chemistry.
Yep.
That's
why. So there's all of that. The thing that didn't solve, though, was the accountability stuff. And like, I'm part of an accountability group for podcasters. And there's 4 of us, and we meet occasionally to talk about our goals and the stuff we're trying to accomplish and that kind of stuff. And so that's helpful, but also generally those folks don't do the same kinds of things in their show that I do. And so like their big focus is like marketing and booking guests and that kind of stuff. And my big focus is like writing and narrative and sound design and that kind of stuff.
Right.
And so it's helpful. I love them a lot, and I've gotten a lot out of it, but it doesn't completely fill the accountability for what I'm trying to accomplish. And they're also not as much of a business about, like, I make a significant portion of my income from queersplaining. So like it is part of my business. Like I pay my bills with it. And so I like, as much as I'm like a creative storytelling type person, like it's part of how I pay my bills. And so I have to think about it from a business standpoint too. And that's something that is hard to talk with a lot of podcasters about, because for a lot of podcasters, it's just something fun and it's a hobby, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But if we don't have that experience in common, it's really tough for us to be a support to each other, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And
it's a matter of different priorities. And stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And again, in this big constellation of blogs and books and all of this sort of stuff, I had read somebody talking about journaling and how journaling can be helpful to just kind of like get your thoughts out on paper. And if you're worried about something, it's a good way to kind of let it go, to like get it like out of your head and into the world somehow.
Right.
And that really resonated with me, because I realize about myself, part of the reason that I tell such deeply personal stories on my podcast sometimes is because putting it out into the world is catharsis for me. Like it actually helps me process and deal with feelings. And so I thought, the more like intimate sort of day-to-day stuff, if I was to write that down, like maybe that would be helpful. And so I gave it a shot, and without even really thinking about it, instead of just journaling like in the first person, like I did this and I did this and I did this and I hope for this, I ended up writing it kind of like in the form of a letter to myself.
I saw the one that you posted that day, and I was just all like, I love this. This is such a good idea. Like letter to future Callie. Like I love that.
And it didn't start that way. Like it started as like, I'll just get my thoughts out of my head and onto paper, and that'll help me sleep better at night. If I'm anxious about something, I've excised it at least a little bit in a way, right? So like it didn't start as an accountability thing, but I realized I was writing a letter to the me that's going to like get up and try to accomplish stuff again tomorrow. And as I was reading it, I realized like, oh, that's like, it's helping me keep my head in the game, you know, because it'll take the form of like, hey, you accomplished this thing today. Didn't that feel great? Don't you want to feel that good again? Or, you know, or like, you were going to try to do this today and you didn't, and that didn't feel great. You don't want to feel that way again. Do you? Like that kind of stuff? It's not like angsty, angry, beating myself up kind of stuff. It's more just like an honest reflection of like, hey, you fell short today and that sucked. You don't want to do that again tomorrow because it feels like shit.
Yeah, like let's be proactive and prevent ourselves, you know, our future selves from feeling those, you know, I'm an awful piece of shit person sort of feelings.
Yeah. And so in a really sneaky way, what it ended up doing is creating the kind of outside accountability that I need. Because tomorrow Callie is just enough of a different person that I feel an obligation to do right by them.
Right. Yeah. And tomorrow Callie is directly affected by today Callie. So you want to make sure that you're doing all of the things possible in order to make things easier on tomorrow Callie, and make things, you know, like no, I know exactly what you mean. And I love that so much. Like it's such a good idea. Just to, you know, once you find something that works, and the fact that it's, you know, that it works well is like, this is just, it's fucking great. Like,
and what I think it is for me too, is that like, because I get anxious, sometimes it's easy for me to forget about how good it feels when I do the thing that I'm anxious about sometimes. Like one of the fun things that I'm doing right now is I'm like really working on trying to get fluent in Klingon. I've been I've been dabbling on and off in the Klingon language since I was like 10 or 11, you know. And I've gone in sprints where there's like a couple of weeks where I'm like memorizing vocabulary and that kind of stuff. And I joined the Klingon Language Institute because that's a thing if you didn't know. And I was like, I really, really want to do this time. And then I every time something happens, right? Like I have a bunch to drink the night before, I wake up and I just decide I'm not doing a fucking thing today. You know, the next day I also don't do a fucking thing. And then the next day I think like, well, okay, I'm going to do the bare minimum that I have to accomplish today. And then it's like, God, like I've fallen so far behind. And then it becomes, it's almost like I get anxious about confronting the fact that I've not done this thing that I wanted to do. And I just kind of like try to forget about it by not coming back to it.
Yeah.
And, just becoming aware of that dynamic has been huge. And it's something to remind me if, it's like I'm using this app called Anki. It's free. It's badass if you want to learn a language. And it lets you make your own flashcards. And
nice.
The method that I've been using is that you match words with pictures. So your brain conceptualizes the word instead of just like, you know, because like if you think about it, like when you hear the word cookie, you're not thinking in your head, the first thing that comes to mind is probably not COOKIE, right? You see a cookie. You remember that time you made cookies the last time. You remember the best
Cookie Monster.
Right, exactly. So it brings all of these sensory experiences back to your head, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the method that I'm using, is like trying to make sensory experiences associated with words in Klingon instead of just like, this word means this.
Yeah, direct translation. Yeah. And especially I feel like, and again, I feel like, with learning a new language, and even if it's a language you're already familiar with and stuff, there's not always direct translations for stuff. So the concept is so much more important.
Yeah. Well, and that's a problem in Klingon too, because it was invented as if it's an alien language. So there are some concepts that you have to express in Klingon. Like if I was going to tell you what it would mean, I would have to use sentences. I couldn't just tell you a word. But how this is relevant is the practice that you want to do, it builds and builds and builds, right? Mm-hmm. And it becomes a thing that I become anxious about confronting again.
Right.
And it's really easy for that feeling to overwhelm the feeling of how much fun it is when I do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm not thinking about how much fun I'm going to have when I like tweet in Klingon on Twitter and someone responds to me on Klingon. What I'm thinking about is how anxious I am about confronting all of the backlog of like practice and learning.
Right.
And so what writing this kind of stuff down does is it reminds me of that. Mm-hmm. So I can think about, because like today I did that. I had been putting it off a bunch and I went back to it and I had like a big backlog of flashcards to review.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a lot, it was kind of frustrating because I had forgotten some words and that kind of stuff, but it was fun. And I just think about like, I'm learning a fictional language. That's the nerdiest, coolest shit in the world. This is so much fun, right?
Yeah.
And so I actually went in my planner and I wrote down, I was like, remember how much fun this is. Remember how this feels. So tomorrow, if I'm feeling anxious about confronting it again, I'll have it there in black and white saying like, no, this is going to be fun. You have to remember that too. It's going to be fun and it's going to feel good.
Mm-hmm.
And
so there's actual evidence for
right. And so like it kind of
feel.
Yeah. And it serves all of those purposes.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's I guess it's a way to just kind of like interrupt the anxious thoughts and like the things that I'm worrying about, because even like taking away the concept of like tomorrow Callie versus like, obviously that's a psychological construct, right? That's not a real thing, but it's psychologically significant. But if nothing else, it's just like, it brings back those feelings to the front of mind for me. Like how good it feels when you accomplish something, how much fun it is when you do this stuff.
Yeah.
And I think about, I've like kind of got a system together for figuring out work stuff, but there's like personal projects that I want to do that I didn't really do a good job of keeping up with last year, even though like it was something I thought about all year. Like there's podcast projects that I want to do that aren't queer-splaining. There's Klingon language stuff. And what I figured out, and this is another thing that skeeves some people out, and I totally understand that, but it seems to work for me, is that I have to create a system for those kinds of things, just like I do work stuff to stay with it. Or else I'll just like lay on the couch playing with my dog, watching Star Trek all day. Not that that's not a good thing. But I'll get to the end of the year again and think like, God, I wish I had spent more time practicing Klingon, because I can review flashcards with one hand while I'm playing with my dog with the other. Like I can still give him the time that he needs.
Yeah.
And so I went through and I made a list of like, what are my actual priorities? And there's a lot of discourse around like New Year and that kind of stuff. And, it really annoys me how hard some people sneer at the idea of like, it's the new year. I want to make a change. And I get it. I mean, it's arbitrary, but fucking everything's arbitrary.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah.
And I mean, like human beings in general, we're narrative creatures, right? Like story and ritual and beginning and end and all of that stuff is psychologically significant to us.
Right.
And so I thought like, for some reason, this feels like a good time for me. Like, New Year, this feels like a good time. And like, recognizing that, like, in the grand scheme of things, there's actually nothing significantly different between December 31st and January 1st.
Yeah.
I can also recognize that it feels like there is, even though it's really not.
Yeah.
And like, I can use that to my advantage. Right. And so I sort of conceptualized all the personal stuff that I want to do the same way that I do work stuff. And so I thought, like, broad overarching themes, like, what do I want to have done by the end of this year? And specifically, there's 2 personal podcast projects that I want to do. I want to be relatively fluent in Klingon, and I want to learn how to play the drums.
Ooh, that's so funny because I played percussion in middle school and high school, and it's so much fun.
Yeah.
Oh, you're gonna have so much fun with that.
And so I put that stuff in my planner and plan habits around it, just like I do work. And initially that felt a little scary to me because it's important for me to have time where work brain is turned off.
Right.
And that's difficult for me because, queer splaining is a passion project. It's something I love. It's mostly fun, but it is still work. It's a lot of work. And so there's already some like boundary blending there between work brain and personal brain and fun brain and like creating meaning in my life brain. And so it's kind of important for me to have that delineation in other places in my life where like, I'm doing this because it makes me feel good and it's fun. And I'm doing this because it's work that I think is important. It's work that will help me pay the mortgage, that kind of stuff. And so like, it's important for me to have like borders between those things because I feel like, if I never leave work brain, burnout ensues very, very quickly.
Yeah.
And again, so I was worried about that. But I was like, I know this works in terms of helping me like stick with good habits and accomplish things. So like, let's give it a shot and see what happens. And it's only been a couple of days, but so far it seems to have worked for me. I'm like remembering like, when I did my Klingon practice today, I think I had like 4 days worth of reviews to do, and it was a lot. But again, it was fun. And so I went, like, when I was done, I literally went in my planner and I was like, this was so much fucking fun. Don't forget about that tomorrow. And so I've got like little notes for myself when I go to write my letter at the end of the night. I've got little notes that will help me remember that stuff. And what I have found is part of my aversion to that was the idea that it's part of my identity that I crave novelty, right? Like I love that about myself, that I like experiencing new things. And putting such a rigid structure on your day feels, initially to me, it felt antithetical to that idea. Like if every day is planned and every day is structured, where's the room for spontaneity? Where's the room for fun? That kind of stuff. But what I've figured out is, I mean, especially in COVID times, like spontaneity is not really a thing. Like it's the next TV show that I'm watching with friends on Zoom, that's spontaneity. Right?
Yeah.
Like, something surprising happens in this TV show that I'm watching virtually with my friends.
It's like, holy shit, that was amazing.
Right.
It's all like, like a year ago, it would have been just all like, this is so mundane, but we've adapted, with the ever changing times. So yeah.
But what I've found, at least thus far for myself, is that planning for things like that doesn't take away the enjoyment for me. Especially because, when I plan things like that, especially now in COVID times, the most novel things that happen generally are things like this. Like somebody's like, hey, come on my podcast, come on my live stream, that kind of stuff. Yeah. And I mean, that's a thing that's planned anyways, because I have to be at a certain place at a specific time. And so I just kind of started deconstructing the idea that like scheduling and structure does not mean that you can't have fun, and it doesn't mean that you can't be spontaneous. Like I'm supposed to be here at 3 p.m. Eastern on this live stream, and that's structure and that's regimented, but our conversation is not. Like we don't have like talking points that are like, you have to make it through all of these talking points by the end of the stream, or, Right.
Yeah. So, like there's still that, that idea of, there's so many ways that it can go. I think I hear the cat complaining at me.
You do hear the cat complaining because I can hear it as well.
Half a second, because she's gonna complain forever.
Oh, good. Oh my god. And I love those leggings. Oh my god. She can't hear me, but I think those leggings are fantastic.
Come on. She ran away. Come on, Stanley.
Nice.
I'm gonna leave the door open. She ran away, and then I stepped on a squeaker toy.
Outstanding.
She's all like, "No, I don't want to come in there." You just said that you did, fucking cat. So before I distracted everything, one thing that I actually was specifically wanting to ask about this subject, because it's been sort of coming up with the, work brain and personal brain, and how do you find that you yourself are able to, because since I'm assuming you've been working from home for a couple of years, doing all the freelance editing and stuff, how do you find you take a step back from the work stuff in order to be like, okay, this is something fun, this is something that I want to do? Do you find that it's a necessary sort of differentiation?
Yeah, what I figured out for me is that there just has to be something that breaks my stride. So I am sitting at my desk at my computer, and this is where I do work. And this is my office, and my office is not just for work. Well, according to what I tell the IRS, my office is just for work. Because you get a tax write-off for that.
It's I promise it is. I swear.
Yeah, but work brain is me at my desk. If I'm doing, sometimes I do personal stuff at the desk. If I'm on someone's live stream playing games for fun, and it's not something that's part of work. This, I don't really consider this work. This is fun. But it has my good webcam and my good mic. So I sit here, even though it's not work stuff. But also I'm still in work brain, because when you and I are done, I'm going to go back to accomplishing a couple of things for today. But when I'm done with work, I because I work on a laptop, and I just dock it on my desk with monitors and stuff. And when it's time to switch into non-work brain, I will pull off my laptop and I'll go sit on my couch instead of sitting at my desk. And I'll go in the kitchen, I'll play with Wedge, I'll make some food, I'll get something to drink, that kind of stuff. So there's a physical break in my day between saying okay, I'm done with work for today. Now I'm switching into whatever other mode. I'm gonna jump on Zoom with some friends and watch some shows. I'm gonna, hang out with my wife, that kind of stuff. So it's having it's space. When I'm here, I'm working almost all of the time. And when I'm not here, I'm not working. And creating those barriers in my brain has been very, very important. Especially because, with freelance work and even with my podcast to a certain extent, I'm never really completely off. I have a community that I run on Discord for my podcast, and I've always got to be at least somewhat paying attention to that, right? To moderate it, if things get out of hand. Right. And so I can never turn that brain down to 0%. And that's just an artifact of the kind of work that I do. Because if a client asks me a question and sends me an email, sometimes I need to respond to that email right away. I think a lot about does this need a response now? Can I wait until tomorrow morning? But I have to be at least aware of those things at most times. And so for me, it's not even necessarily turning down the work brain to 0%. It's just turning it down to 10%. Yeah. So I can just be I've got my notifications set up on my emails to where I normally only get notifications for emails if it's an actual person sending me a message. So newsletters, all of that kind of stuff, I don't get notifications for that. I don't get notifications when people leave comments, but I get notifications when people send me messages, that kind of stuff.
Right.
So yeah, creating those borders between that is really, really hugely important. I would also be remiss if I didn't talk about the importance of medication.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, and I had mainly asked because when we moved, so we moved.
I feel like there's a story there.
Here's the story here. We moved to Portland. I took a 3-day drive from DFW to Portland, Oregon.
DFW. So you're from Texas?
Yeah, I don't know how you didn't know that. I'm really wondering.
Sorry.
And it comes back around. I love it. Funnily enough, I also have a little Texas charm too.
Of course you do. Of course
I do. And a tattoo of said charm, but that's neither here nor there. When I was making the 3-day drive, it was like right when everything was starting to shut down, like in March. So like I left Arlington on the day that Dallas County, which there's like Tarrant County and Dallas County. I left the day that Dallas County was all like, hey, you might not want to leave, which is when Texas was actually kind of taking it seriously. And
for the like 2 hours that happened.
Basically, yeah. It's like it was the only time I could leave and shit like that. But and then I got here the day that Oregon was all like, hey, so don't go anywhere. So it was like that 3 days in between was super stressful. But when I got here, I had already been working from home because of COVID stuff, and I was already having those problems with figuring out do I step back? Nathaniel was already up here, so it was hard to like just be all like, okay, like there is this hard line of it is 5 o'clock. I'm stepping back. I'm gonna sit on the couch with my boyfriend and eat ice cream and play with the dogs and stuff. So when I got up here, I was still working from home. I worked from home for the same law firm for a few months after I got here. So I got like this like nice setup and stuff, and I would find I had the same problem of being like, it's 5 o'clock or 4:30 technically, because had to adjust for time. It is 4:30. I have to figure out how to step back. Like I have to figure out how to, have this line in the sand of I'm gonna sign off. I'm not gonna feel like I'm still working, because there's still sometimes that even though I don't work from home anymore, that I'm still like I feel like I'm working from home and stuff like that. So it's like, so that's been hard for me. Even still now, it's still hard.
Because most people go somewhere for work, right? And that commute is the thing, whether you're driving or you're on a bus or you're on a subway, whatever. And when I had a day job, my commute was like 30, 35 minutes, depending on the time of day. And so I had a pretty significant amount of time. Like I'd jump in the car, a podcast would turn on, and I would just forget about work. And by the time I got home, I was ready to just like, I'm just Callie doing Callie stuff.
Yeah.
But that's a really, really hard thing from working from home, is setting those boundaries, especially, I'm fairly privileged in that, like, I have space in my home to set aside for work, even if I had a day job, that I had to go to, like I would be able to set up a separate workspace for my day job and come over here to do podcast stuff. You know what I mean? And not everybody has that. Like if you live in a small apartment, or if you only have, you only have like a desktop computer and that's all you have. And so like the thing that I would, like taking a walk, if that's a thing you can do, or even just like getting up and going to the kitchen and like grabbing a coffee, grabbing a drink, making something to eat, like that kind of stuff. Just anything that like makes your brain shift hard out of that state where your focus really just has to go on something else.
Right.
Which I think like cooking is good for that. Right. if you've got the time and energy to do that, like actually cooking instead of throwing something in the microwave, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And again, not a thing everyone has the time and energy to do. Totally respect that. But it's a thing to try. It's a thing to try if you think you can.
Yeah.
Just something that really, really makes you hard turn out of work mode, whatever that is. And for me, it's like physically being in a different space. That really, really helps for me.
Yeah. I like that because we live in a house with a couple of roommates. So we have our office, and then we have our bedroom, and then they have a little more free reign of the house than we do, but that's neither here nor there. So it's sort of, sometimes it's like, you know, I'm always either in the office or I'm in the bedroom, and it's sort of, I like the walk idea, and I'm sure the dogs would like the walk idea too. Benny still does not give a shit. Update on Benny. Benny still does not give a shit.
That makes me love Benny.
He's a corgi with a tail. I just want to point that out. He's a corgi with a tail.
My God, I love that so much.
He's a good boy.
But yeah, the necessary first step for all of this for me was getting on medication for my anxiety.
Yeah.
That was really it. Well, I mean, I guess the necessary first step was recognizing there was a problem and making the phone call to get the appointment. But I had actually been saying for a while that, you know, I need to, you know, because, you know, back when I had a very much less defined idea of what the problem was, it was like there's something going on that I need to talk to a psychologist about, and I need to maybe think about medication for. And I'm just like, I'm open to whatever. If there's a workbook I can do, let's roll with that. If I need to get on medication, I'm cool with that. Like whatever it is, I just want to try something.
Right.
And, you know, I did this like 2-hour-long appointment with a psychiatrist, and, you know, she's asking me all of these questions about my symptoms. And it was so weird saying it out loud to a stranger. I was like, wow, there is something really wrong here. This is really bad.
Coming to that realization is so like, oh my gosh, like I sort of suppressed a lot of this, like shit.
And she's like, yeah, so I definitely think we've got some anxiety going on here. And and I, you know, and I don't have any stigma against medication or anything like that, but I do know some doctors jump to that quickly as like, you have a problem, medication, you know, and I just want to use what's right. Like if medication's what's right, cool. If therapy work is right, that's what's, you know, maybe it's a combination. But she was very like, here's what this medication does. If you want to give it a shot on a low dose, if it doesn't work for you, it's not a big deal to come off of it. And I was like, oh, okay. You know, because she was just giving me options, and that felt very good to me. I felt very much like I was directing things, you know, and she's like, you know, we'll meet up again in 2 weeks and you tell me how you're doing and we can make adjustments if we need to. And, you know, the adjustment period on SSRIs is not great. Anybody who's on SSRI knows that.
I don't know if because I'm on Wellbutrin XL, Lamictal, Abilify, and Concerta, and I don't know what any of those like exactly are. I'm on
Lexapro.
Like I just know they work.
Yeah. Well, and that's exactly it. You know, she was like, it's not going to completely take away your anxious feelings, but it's going to make them a lot less intense, and it'll make them easier to deal with. And I was like, cool. I can work with that. And that's exactly what happened. It really kind of took the brain fog off to where I could talk in a serious way with my therapist about how I was feeling, and I could think about my feelings intellectually instead of going down that like anxiety death spiral of like feeling terrible about myself. And so I could actually be like, you know, I'm feeling this way, and I did this coping mechanism as a result, and I don't feel like that's very healthy. What do you think, therapist? You know, instead of just thinking like, well, I did this because I'm worthless and I'm lazy and I can't get my life together.
You look at it from a far more objective stance.
Yeah. It was, and it was just magical. And that, like the last hour of stuff that we've been talking about, that was kind of the first like really, really big step to that, was getting on that medication. And I know I'm lucky. Like a lot of people have to go through like figuring out doses and like switching medications around and that kind of stuff. And I got very lucky that like the first thing I worked at, the first dose that I tried has really, really worked for me. And like The side effects, like, it's made sex stuff a little bit more difficult. But that's really it. And honestly, like, the trade-off is so worth it for me.
Yeah. It's like, oh darn, I just have to, try a little bit harder. It's like,
That's exactly it.
Shucks.
I gotta work a little harder for it. I can live with that if it's like helping me keep the rest of my fucking life together.
It's like, this is okay. This is a trade-off that I will gladly take. Yeah. And I mean, I think there is such that stigma, and it's so nice to hear people sort of like normalizing like medication and therapy and stuff like that. Like, it's so important because there's so much stuff having to do with mental health and mental illness that people just, they don't want to talk about because there is the stigma associated with, oh my God, everybody's just going to think that I'm, crazy and stuff. And it's just all like, you take care of your brain the same way you take care of anything else having to do with your health. Like, it's so important. And I love that, like, one thing that Eli always says is just take your fucking meds.
Yeah, seriously. Like, it's not a panacea. It doesn't solve all your problems, but it makes your problems so much fucking easier to solve. Or I should say it often does. I know it's not the answer for everyone, and that's totally okay. But that's been my experience. And the folks that I know that that meds work for, it doesn't erase your problems. It just makes them a lot easier to deal with.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That matters. Like, and of course there's a lot to be said about access to those kinds of things. I'm lucky that, like, I mean, I'm self-employed, right? Like, if I wasn't married, I'd be fucked. I wouldn't have access to any of this stuff. My wife has a regular W-2 job and insurance from her job. So, like, that's how I'm able to access all of this stuff. Otherwise, I don't know if I would even be able to see a psychiatrist or a therapist regularly, or be on meds, that kind of stuff. Like, so I think that's an important thing to talk about too, is access, because that's not a thing everybody has.
Right. Yeah. And I'm diabetic, so I've like the whole having to have a job with insurance, which, oh my God, your healthcare should not be tied to your employer, but that's a whole different conversation. Right. Yeah, like, there's so much, and Nathaniel had to get on my insurance because his insurance through his current job is just terrible. So I'm very, very fortunate that, like, we're not married. We've been together for a couple of years and everything. So they qualify us as like domestic partners and stuff.
Oh, right. Okay.
So they're like, you've got this established relationship. We've lived together long enough and blah, blah, blah. So he's on my insurance. So we are both very, very fortunate in that respect. And we like their access to treatment, access to medication, access to everything is something that I think, along with stigma having to do with mental health and mental illness and stuff, has to be talked about more. Yeah,
the stigma is a thing too. And like, I hate using the word mindset, because there's a lot of toxic positivity around the idea of mindset. Like, if you're not accomplishing things, you just need to work on your mindset. And it's like, no, sometimes you need money for food, actually, and that's the source of your problems. But like, the idea that mental health problems are a character flaw, as opposed to mental health problems are just, sometimes that's just the way your brain works. And it's, having a mental illness is no different than like having a cold or having the flu, that kind of stuff. Like, and I think I am lucky in that I didn't grow up with that coming at me from home at all. Like we definitely get that message as a society, and I internalized a little bit of that, but it wasn't anything that, my mom ever said anything about or anything like that. And so it wasn't super hard for me to come around to the idea that, like, if you need medication, that's cool. Like, if you get the flu, you need to take medicine for that. If you're depressed, you can take medicine for that. And and that's,
take care of yourself.
And so thankfully that wasn't a huge lift for me. but I think it is a huge lift for a lot of people because we grow up with that messaging that, and I mean, of course, a lot of it comes from the more puritanical side of our like mainstream religious culture, right? Like, you know, you don't have enough Jesus in your life. That's why you're depressed. That's all you need.
That's, oh my God, not
Yeah.
even kidding. That is the exact message that I got from the fundamentalist church that I went to after my dad died. Was like, you just need to give your problems up to God. And I did not properly deal with my father's death for at least a decade. And I still have problems like talking about that stuff because I did like religion basically like prohibited me from properly dealing with it.
Yeah. And I see like, and I, you know, I think there's a conversation to be had about whether this is an outcropping of that or not. But I also see a lot of that kind of attitude, even in spaces that are ostensibly non-religious, right? Because I do freelance podcast work, I'm in a ton of podcast groups and that kind of stuff. And there's so much of the like really annoying sort of toxic self-help stuff in the podcast world. And so I run into it a lot. And so I like, even though I have no interest in that world, I hate it. I end up encountering it a lot just because I see the stuff that people post in these groups and stuff.
Right.
And so much of it is, you know, it's they're not, you know, explicitly atheist, but it's not religious in terms of like, they're not saying like, well, the Bible says, you know, it's that like, I think it's probably capitalism replacing like mainstream religion in that way, that like, you know, if you're not succeeding, it's because you're not hustling hard enough. If you're not accomplishing the things you want to, it's because your mindset's wrong.
The problem is with you. The problem is not with like stuff around you at all.
Yeah, there's just no acknowledgement whatsoever that external circumstances can be a factor. And of course, I mean, there's something to be said for like committing to doing hard work, right? Like that is a necessary step. If you want to succeed at something, you have to put in the work. But that's also not the entirety of the story. You know what I mean? Like when I look at, when I look at what I've built with my podcast, I work very, very hard at my show, and I've worked very, very hard to get to where I am. But I'm also extraordinarily lucky and privileged in that, one, I came out as trans and had a lot of support. I didn't lose a lot of stuff in my life as a result. Very supportive community. I met a lot of really cool people that helped me out a whole lot. And again, I mean, there's some of me in that because I like making friends and I'm good at networking. And so some of that's work, but some of it's being in the right place at the right time. Some of it was being born into a family that was good. Some of it's, being, lucky to be born in a location that I was, right? All of that stuff counts. And sometimes it counts more than like how hard you want to hustle in your mindset. You know what I mean? Like if your bank account's zero, hustling isn't going to get you groceries to eat your dinner tonight. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Like there's once people are able to like be more accepting of things that are out of other people's control, because I think everybody, well, I use everybody like in the royal sense, in the
right,
like not not literally hashtag not all, but I think there's a lot of people who are like, like you were saying, just the problem is with you, the problem is with mindset, hustle, but once people are more accepting and understanding of shit happens. Sometimes shit sucks. Shit sucks more for some people than it does for other people. And that's putting it very, very mildly and very, very basically. Yeah. Like that's not even getting to all of, multitudes of other stuff.
And the thing that makes it even more frustrating for me, and I think even more harmful for a lot of people, is that I think there's an attitude that acknowledging that external circumstances can be part of the problem or the problem means that you're just blaming your problems on that, throwing your hands up in the air and saying there's nothing I can do, right? And maybe sometimes that's the case, especially if there legitimately is really nothing you can do. But acknowledging all of this and understanding that like my brain works this way, there's nothing that I can do to physically rewire my brain.
Mhm.
It like if you are trying to fix your brain, quote unquote, all of that hustle, all of that hard work, it's for nothing because
Yeah.
you're working really hard at shit that just doesn't work.
Yeah.
But if you acknowledge the way that your brain works, you
Mhm.
can put that same energy and that same hustle, quote unquote, into doing shit that does work.
Right.
And it's even more motivating because I think about the shift in thinking about thinking my problems were a product of a character flaw as opposed to thinking about like, well, this is the way that I am and I need to figure out a way to work with how I am. I still had to work really, really hard to figure that out.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And it's
Yeah.
the same energy, but directed in a different way and directed in a way that's actually helpful and has actually improved my life and actually made me just fucking enjoy life more. And
Mhm.
it makes me so mad that like people think it's laziness, and it's not laziness. It's like a lot of it is figuring out where you direct that hard work.
Mhm.
Like figuring yourself out is hard work. Dealing with mental health problems is hard work. Like
Yeah.
organizing your life, especially if you're neurodivergent of any variety, because the world is not built for us. So we have
Mm-mm.
to figure out how to we have to like figure out our little hacks and workarounds. Like I hate the word hack, but that's what it is, right?
Yeah, it's about,
Um,
like, adapt and overcome.
and in big ways and small ways, right? Like our world is built around the 9 to 5, but like that's not a universal human experience, right? Not everyone functions best at those hours.
Right. Yeah.
And it almost like it fucks me up to think about because there is research, actual research that shows if people work less, they're more productive. And this has
Mm.
actually been done in places. And
Yeah.
so if you're a capitalist, you're thinking, how do I make more money? How do I be more productive? Here is research saying that I should have people work less and I should have like I don't know if it's just that like the puritanical mindset overriding the capitalist motivation. I'm not a psychiatrist. I don't know. But like it just weirds me out to think this like oh, my people will be more productive and make even more money for my company if I give them more time off, if I make my work environment less toxic, if
Yeah.
I
Paid sick
uh,
time, stuff like
yeah
that. Yeah.
um
It's
it,
it's amazing how so many, like, and I always mention him because we always have conversations about stuff like this. Nathaniel and I had this conversation the other night about, like, it's amazing how many problems can be solved that people think are, like, major issues with society that can be solved by just like a lot of workers' rights stuff and like income equality and stuff like that. But again, that's a whole nother story. And I've talked a lot about socialism the last few weeks, but you know,
yeah,
it's all good. Ow.
it's I mean just the fundamental realization that like people have different motivations, people have different ways of working through things, and that like whatever your motivations are, letting people lean into those things just always leads to more success.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like letting people do the stuff that they're passionate about and not beating them over the head and that kind of stuff. It makes me really sad to think about, how many people have lived like miserable lives because they're so focused on like, I don't know where dinner's coming from tonight, so I have to stay completely focused on where dinner's coming from tonight, and I can't think about this art that I want to create that's going to
Mhm.
help people. I can't think about this project that I want to do that's going to improve my community. I can't think about spending time with my kids and building great memories with my kids because literally all I'm focused on is if we're going to eat tonight.
Yeah.
And it fucks me up to think about how many people's lives are less than they otherwise would be because of that.
Yeah.
Uh,
Like we stifle people so much because we don't give them proper tools
yeah,
to deal with, things that are thrown at them and things that they're going through and stuff like that. It's just
and not
it's
even don't give. Sometimes it's actively deny,
yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, the I think the most pertinent example now is there's a big conversation in the disability community around like the kinds of accommodations that people are getting because of COVID are things that disabled folks have been asking for and denied for a very, very long time.
Yeah, and it's like you said that we couldn't do stuff like work from home and have modified schedules and stuff like that. You said we couldn't do that, but now all of a sudden you can.
Yep.
It's like people, again, using the royal we and the royal people and the royal everybody and shit. People tend to not give a shit about stuff until it directly affects them. It's like Nancy Reagan.
Yeah.
Like Nancy Reagan didn't give a shit about anything until it directly affected her. I don't remember the exact example of that, but I think you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Well, that's, again, so many conversations to be had about this stuff. Oh my God. I am slowly slipping. I say slipping, but I feel like I've just dove in headfirst into more like socialist mindset and stuff, which I'm just like, this just makes sense.
It really does. It really does. I did an episode with a friend of mine who is a communist activist, and I was like, you know what? I'm not sure that I actually know fully what communism is. So come on to my podcast and let's talk about it. And he kept talking, and I was like, wow, okay, huh? Am I a communist now? I'm like,
the more you find out about this stuff, I had a guest last month, my friend Irish Swede, that talked about like differences between like social democracy and socialism and communism, and like the the like a very much an explain like I'm five thing, because I was sort of like, I get the gist of this stuff, but please tell me more. And then when I had Christy Santiago on like a week or two after that, she was just like, see how much this just makes sense. I'm like, it really does.
Well, and I think so much of it, and I realized this while I was talking to my friend about this, because I kept asking some kind of specific questions about, like, in an ideal communist world, what does X look like? And a lot of his answers were like, well, I don't really know, because we've never been allowed to fundamentally reimagine society in this way. So I can't exactly tell you, because capitalism and colonialism, like those forces have been so powerful. We are so entrenched in the way of life that we lead now. So many of us are completely unable to conceptualize the idea that we could completely reimagine the way our society works.
Yeah.
And I think that's why so many people are married to like, oh, we just need to reform what we have, as opposed to systemic change, right? And I like to consider myself a pragmatist. I tend to think that in most cases, better is better. But at the end of the day, better is not solved. And that comes back to sort of the the idea that, like, when people talk about things like socialism, everybody thinks like, well, that's such a fantasy. And nobody stops to think like the idea that we'll create a better world doing what we're doing now is equally a fantasy, and a fantasy that we are actually like living the failure of.
Yeah.
But we're still so afraid to try something different, whatever that is, whether we decide that we want to go with anarchist philosophy or socialist philosophy, like whatever that is, we are so afraid to even acknowledge the idea that a fundamental reimagining of our society is, one, possible, let alone desirable, right? Like we are fed propaganda our entire lives that the way we do things is the best we have been able to come up with, and we're just always trying to improve it. And that's just fundamentally untrue. Not the case. Not even close to the case.
Yeah. Like there's so many other options and so many other ways we could do stuff. And if progress was not inhibited by so many people, then society would be better. But, again, totally different conversation. But,
I say, Jeff Bezos has got to have that yacht. So we got to keep going to work.
Oh, dear God. Oh, I don't want to end it on a downer.
I was going to say, now that we've brought the whole conversation down, this is
don't want to. One again, totally random thing that I did want to ask. What are those guitars on your wall?
Oh, so the one over here, actually, I'll tell you about this one first. This is just
looks like a Rickenbacker.
No, I had a Rick at one point, and I sold it, and I miss it very dearly. It's my favorite piece of musical equipment I've ever owned. I worked at Guitar Center. I had it on layaway for like 6 months, making tiny payments on it. But I sold it when one of my bands broke up, and I needed to buy a metal guitar. So this guitar it's just an Ibanez Art Core. It's nothing special. A friend of mine did that custom paint job to it. I think underneath it's just like a sunburst kind of like wood stain color. It's just a basic guitar. It's nothing super impressive. It looks neat. And when I was putting my office together, I just thought like, oh, I'll hang guitars on the walls because that looks neat. But this one over here, this is actually my dad's Fender Strat that my uncle gave to me when my dad died.
I have one of my grandpa's guitars that my aunt held on to for a long time, and I've never learned how to play it. It needs to be restrung. I really want to learn how to play it. I don't know if I have the coordination to sing and play guitar at the same time.
Nobody does until they do it.
Yeah.
Almost nobody does until they do it. Over time, I become fundamentally more and more skeptical of the idea of inherent inborn talent. Like, most people suck at everything the first time they try it, and you just keep going until you suck less, and then eventually you don't suck anymore. But yeah, the Strat, that's like a big thing for me, and it would take me an hour to tell the whole story. But basically, my dad never chose to be a part of my life. When I was 18, I made contact with him, and just realized that relationship was always going to be a source of hurt for me. And so I cut off contact myself, and it was a whole thing. And he died a couple of years ago, and my uncle, he's like, I know things are weird and things are bad, and obviously like nothing can ever make up for it. But I feel like you should have this guitar if you want it. And I was like, I think I do.
Yeah.
I think I do.
Yeah.
And then you can't see I have my acoustic guitar hanging up to that side of me, and
nice.
I have, the guitar that I toured with in my metal band and stuff I have on that wall over there.
Nice. Oh, I love it. Yeah, my ex-husband played guitar and I would sing, and nowadays I just like sing in the shower sort of thing. Like I have a playlist and stuff. It's got a lot of Fleetwood Mac on it, but that's,
Yeah. Well, that's my, I've always said, even when I was like playing guitar actively in bands, like recording music and playing shows, I always said that, that spiritually I'm a drummer, even though like practically I'm a guitar player. And I think that was an artifact of me. Like when I was a kid, I thought playing guitar was cooler than playing drums, which I don't think now. And I think that was a silly attitude to have. But guitar was the instrument that I picked when I think I was like 14, 15 when I started playing. And I just sat in my basement playing along to Metallica for hours and hours and hours. And so I was a guitar player, and that's what I was.
Yeah.
But I always pay attention to drums more. I always notice drums more. There are songs that I listen to specifically for certain drum licks. There are songs that I don't like that I listen to because the drums sound so good. The Green Day American Idiot album, I don't have anything against Green Day. I'm not a super huge fan, but the drums on that album are incredible sounding. The guitar tone's great too. But like every once in a while I will put on that record and listen to it just because it sounds good, especially the drums. And so I finally thought to myself a few months ago, like, I should find like a really cheap used drum kit and learn to play drums. And so I did, actually. I bought it. It's being shipped. It's not here yet. So yeah.
That's so exciting.
Yeah. So that's my project for this year.
Like, I'm so excited for you for that.
Yeah. To get somewhat competent at drums. That's my goal.
Like I remember just having so much fun with it. And like I'm a big music dork. Like I said earlier, I listen to bluegrass, but it's like, I all country classic rock. Like I have a Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers tattoo.
Nice.
Like music dork, can't help it. Tom Petty's death destroyed me.
Yeah.
that was hard. That was very hard. But yeah, so I think it's good to end on a positive note. So I think that's a positive note to end on.
We brought it back
a little longer than I usually do, but I'm great with that because this has been
totally fine with it.
An awesome conversation. Callie, thank you so very much. This has been so much fun, so amazing. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you. I love everything that you do, and just you're an amazing and wonderful person. And if we either ever meet in the middle or one of us is in the other one's state, I definitely want to get one of those quality Callie hugs.
I actually have so many friends in the Portland area. That's like post-COVID, when it's safe to travel, I plan on taking a trip to Portland just because I have so many friends there. So we'll figure it out. We'll make it happen.
Yeah. I've got a few friends that are up here that I met on Twitter after the fact.
Yeah.
Like after I'd already moved up here, I'm just all like, I had already moved up here. I didn't realize they were in Portland. And then it's all like, oh my God, you're in Portland. Like my friend Chrissy is up here, and I'm just all like, you need to cook for me. I'm so excited.
One of my thought exercises that I try to do to give myself a little hope is I try to like think about and visualize all the cool shit that I'm going to do after COVID is over. And I love traveling, and I got to do it a bunch for conventions and for podcasts and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And so I was thinking about like, okay, like who do I really, really want to see post COVID? And I realized there were like already 3 or 4 people on that list. Like those people all live in Portland. So I'm going to need to take a trip there, I think.
Yes, you do. I love it. All right. Well, that's going to do it for us today. Again, Callie, thank you so much. Where can people find you? Where can people support you? Where can people show you love? I put some links to Twitter. I put links to the Queersplaining Twitter and the Queersplaining website in the description. Yeah, where else can we find you and support you?
That's it. Callie gets it. Callie gets it on Twitter and Instagram, queersplaining.com for the podcast, or anywhere you listen to podcasts, you should be able to find Queersplaining.
Nice. I love it. Well, that's going to do it for us today. Thank you all so much for watching. I appreciate every single person so much. It's ridiculous how much appreciation I have for y'all, but I always feel a need to say that y'all are wonderful, and I love you guys. Y'all have a great day.
Bye.